Morgan Blake. Entry number 010. The Vanishing Hotel. Some places are meant to disappear, but not everyone who enters them does. What if I told you that some places aren't just haunted by ghosts, but by time itself? What if there was a hotel that reappeared after almost a century, trapping those who enter within its twisted reality? Stick around until the end, and you'll see why some places are better left forgotten. I'm Morgan Blake, and this is the story of the Vanishing Hotel. The story began with a tip. It was the kind of information that comes whispered over the phone late at night, the sort of thing that normally sends a chill down your spine. On the other end of the line, a voice spoke in shaky tones, insistent that something impossible had happened. The caller mentioned a hotel, long thought lost to history, which had reappeared. Not as a memory, not as a dusty photograph, but as something real and tangible in the present. This hotel, known as the Stanton Grand, had once been the pride of its town in the early 1900s. It was a grand establishment where the wealthy came to escape the mundane realities of life, basking in luxury and impeccable service. But in 1925, tragedy struck. A fire, swift and unforgiving, tore through the building, leaving nothing but ashes and shattered dreams behind. The hotel was never rebuilt, and the lot it once occupied became a scar on the town, a place avoided by those who remembered its history. Despite its demise, stories persisted. Whispers told of the hotel's return on certain nights, when the moon hung high and the fog thickened, turning the world eerie and strange. People claimed to have seen it standing in all its former glory, and some tales suggested that those who entered its doors were never seen again. Of course, these were just stories. The kind that grow with each retelling, meant to scare children or entertain the curious. But the person on the phone wasn't just telling a story, they believed it. They had seen the hotel with their own eyes, and they mentioned that someone they knew had gone inside. As a seasoned investigator of the strange and unexplained, I've heard my share of bizarre tales. But this one gnawed at me. There was something about the way the caller spoke, the details they provided, that made it hard to dismiss as mere legend. So, I decided to investigate. It was a cold, clear night when I set out for the site where the Stanton Grand once stood. The town itself had long since moved on, the streets were quiet, and the people seemed content to forget the past. But as I approached the empty lot, a sense of unease settled over me, a feeling that made me question whether I should turn back. The lot was just as I expected, overgrown with weeds, the remnants of the old foundation barely visible beneath the tangled roots. It was an unremarkable place, a forgotten patch of earth where nature had begun to reclaim what once was. But as I stood there, something changed. The air around me seemed to grow heavier, thicker, as if the world itself was holding its breath. A thick fog rolled in, the temperature dropping rapidly. I watched, breathless, as the fog swirled and thickened, distorting the air. And then, like a dream slowly coming into focus, the hotel began to appear. At first, it was nothing more than a shimmer, a ghostly outline against the night. But as I watched, the building became clearer, more solid. The Stanton Grand reassembled itself before my eyes, brick by brick, until it stood as it had nearly a century ago. The windows glowed with a warm, inviting light, and I could hear the faint strains of music drifting out into the night. It was real. The hotel was real. Hesitation gripped me as I approached the entrance. The large wooden doors creaked open as if they had been waiting for me, beckoning me inside. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run away from this place that shouldn't exist. But curiosity, and perhaps something more, drove me forward. I stepped inside. The warmth of the lobby was a stark contrast to the cold night air. The interior was exactly as it would have been in the 1920s, polished marble floors, rich mahogany paneling, and a grand chandelier that cast a soft, golden glow over the room. Guests milled about, dressed in attire from another era, their movements smooth and practiced, as if they were part of a well-rehearsed play. But there was something off about the scene. The guests' eyes were vacant, glassy, like dolls going through the motions of life. They didn't notice me, didn't acknowledge my presence as I moved through the lobby, observing them. It was as if I were invisible to them, or perhaps, as if they were no longer truly alive. I made my way to the front desk, where a man in a crisp uniform stood, his hands clasped in front of him. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. There was no warmth in his gaze, no spark of life. It was like looking into the eyes of a mannequin. The man welcomed me to the Stanton Grand, his voice smooth and pleasant but devoid of genuine emotion. He asked if I would be staying the night, and I hesitated. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, the strangeness of the hotel wrapping itself around my mind like a fog. This was no ordinary hotel, that much was clear. But I needed answers, and the only way to get them was to play along. I forced a smile and nodded. Yes, I would stay. The man handed me a key, the metal cold against my skin. He informed me that my room was 217 and wished me an enjoyable stay. His smile never wavered, never faltered, as if it were permanently fixed in place. Taking the key, I felt a tremor in my hand. I turned and made my way to the elevator, my footsteps echoing softly in the quiet lobby. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hotel was alive, that it was watching me, waiting to see what I would do next. The elevator ride was unnervingly slow, the soft strains of music doing little to calm my nerves. The doors finally opened with a soft chime, revealing a long, dimly lit hallway. The carpet beneath my feet muffled my footsteps as I made my way toward room 217 at the far end of the corridor. As I walked, I began to notice something strange. The hallway seemed longer than it should have been, the distance to my room stretching with each step. The walls appeared to close in, the lights overhead flickering intermittently. It was as if the hotel itself were playing tricks on my senses, distorting reality in subtle but unsettling ways. Determined to reach my room, I pressed on, refusing to let the hotel's illusions deter me. Finally, I reached the door. The key slipped easily into the lock, the mechanism clicking with a sound that echoed in the stillness of the hallway. Inside, the room was exactly what I had expected, frozen in time. The furniture was antique, the bed neatly made with crisp white linens. The decor was elegant but dated, a relic from a bygone era. Yet there was something unsettling about it all, something that set my nerves on edge. The air in the room was thick, heavy with a sense of dread. It was as if the very walls were pressing in on me, closing off any chance of escape. As I set my bag down and took a deep breath, I realized something odd. There were no mirrors in the room. No reflective surfaces at all. It was as if the hotel didn't want me to see something it was hiding from me. A sudden knock on the door startled me, sending a jolt of fear through my body. My heart leaped into my throat as I hesitated, unsure whether to open the door or not. Half expecting to find one of the guests standing there with their vacant eyes staring back at me, I cautiously reached for the handle. But when I opened the door, there was no one there. The hallway was empty, silent, as if the knock had never happened. I stepped out, my footsteps echoing in the stillness, and felt a chill run down my spine. The hotel was playing with me, testing me, trying to see how far it could push before I broke. I began to walk, unsure of where I was going but certain that I needed to keep moving. The hallway twisted and turned, leading me in circles. Doors that should have led to other rooms opened into different parts of the hotel, revealing rooms I hadn't seen before. The layout made no sense, as if the hotel were shifting around me, rearranging itself to keep me trapped. Eventually, I found myself back in the lobby. The same guests were still moving about, their vacant eyes oblivious to my presence. The man at the front desk looked up as I approached, his expression unchanged, his smile as fixed as before. He asked if there was something he could help me with, his voice as smooth and devoid of warmth as it had been earlier. There was an almost sinister edge to his tone, a hint of something dark lurking just beneath the surface. I wanted to demand answers, to shout at him, to force him to tell me what was going on in this strange place. But I knew it was pointless. This hotel, this place, wasn't playing by the rules of reality. It was something else entirely, something beyond my understanding. Instead, I asked how I could leave. The man's smile widened slightly, a glint of something unreadable in his eyes. He suggested that I might not want to leave, reminding me that I had only just arrived. Panic clawed at my chest, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. I turned and walked away, the walls seeming to close in around me as I made my way back into the twisting, turning maze of hallways. I needed to find a way out, but every door I opened led me deeper into the hotel's twisted reality. I wandered the halls for what felt like hours, the oppressive atmosphere weighing down on me like a physical weight. Time had northwest meaning in this place, it stretched and compressed, trapping me in a loop I couldn't escape. The hotel seemed to delight in my confusion, shifting and changing around me, denying me any chance of finding a way out. Finally, I stumbled upon a door that was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling out into the dim hallway. My heart pounded in my chest as I pushed the door open, stepping into a large, opulent ballroom. The chandeliers overhead sparkled with a warm, inviting glow, casting a soft light over the room. But despite the grandeur, the ballroom was empty, devoid of life. I moved further into the room, my sense of dread growing stronger with each step. There was something here, something the hotel didn't want me to find. I could feel it in the air, a presence lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. In the center of the room stood a grand piano, its surface polished to a mirror-like finish. I approached it cautiously, my reflection distorted in the shiny black surface. As I reached out to touch it, a sudden jolt of pain shot through my head, blinding me with a flash of images and sensations. In that moment, I saw the hotel as it had been before the fire, bustling with life and energy. The guests were laughing, dancing, enjoying their stay without a care in the world. But then the scene shifted, darkening as the fire began to spread. The flames engulfed the building quickly, the heat and smoke suffocating everything in their path. The guests panicked, desperately trying to escape, but the doors wouldn't open. The hotel had trapped them inside, feeding on their fear and despair as the flames consumed them. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving me gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I stumbled back from the piano, the reality of what I had seen crashing down on me. The hotel hadn't just been destroyed by the fire, it had been transformed by it, twisted into something dark and malevolent. The fire had given the hotel life, but it was a life fueled by pain and suffering. I knew then that I had to destroy the hotel, to break its hold on the souls trapped within. But how could I do that? The hotel was a liminal space, existing outside of time, feeding on the despair of its occupants. It couldn't be destroyed by conventional means, that much was clear. But there was one thing the hotel feared: light. I could feel it in the way the shadows clung to the walls, in the way the darkness seemed to pulse with life. The hotel thrived in the darkness, hiding from the light of day. If I could flood the hotel with light, it might be enough to break its hold, to force it back into whatever void it had come from. Desperation fueled my search as I moved through the ballroom, my mind racing for a solution. And then I found it, a large, ornate mirror, hidden behind a heavy curtain at the far end of the room. The mirror was old, its surface slightly tarnished, but it was still capable of reflecting light. I dragged it into the center of the room, my muscles straining under the weight, and positioned it to reflect the light from the chandelier overhead. The hotel seemed to shudder in response, the walls groaning in protest as I adjusted the mirror. The light bounced off its surface, filling the room with a blinding brightness. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The guests appeared, their vacant eyes now wide with fear, their bodies trembling as the light washed over them. It was as if the light had awakened something deep within them, something that had been buried for nearly a century. The hotel fought back, the lights flickering, the walls closing in, but I held my ground, determined to see it through. The room began to shake, the floor buckling beneath my feet, the chandelier swinging wildly overhead. The guests screamed, their voices rising in a deafening crescendo as the hotel's hold on them weakened. I could feel the building straining against the light, the darkness trying to reassert itself, but the mirror continued to reflect the light, cutting through the shadows like a knife. And then, with a final, ear-piercing shriek, the hotel began to collapse in on itself. The walls crumbled, the floor giving way beneath me as the entire structure imploded. I fell into darkness, the world spinning around me, my mind teetering on the edge of oblivion. The last thing I heard was the sound of the hotel's dying breath, a long, mournful sigh that echoed in the void. When I came to, I was lying in the middle of the empty lot, the cold night air biting at my skin. The hotel was gone, leaving nothing behind but the faint smell of smoke and the sound of the wind rustling through the weeds. I sat up slowly, my head pounding, my body aching from the ordeal. The Stanton Grand had vanished, taking its twisted reality with it. The souls trapped within had been freed, their despair finally lifted. The weight that had pressed down on me was gone, replaced by a strange sense of calm. I stood, brushing the dirt off my clothes, and took a moment to survey the lot. It was just an empty patch of land now, unremarkable and forgotten. The town around it was still, silent, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. The hotel might be gone, but the memory of it would linger, a dark stain on the town's history. As I made my way back to my car, the events of the night played over and over in my mind. The hotel, the guests, the twisted reality that had nearly consumed me, it was all too surreal to fully comprehend. But one thing was clear, I had faced the impossible and come out the other side. I had confronted the darkness and lived to tell the tale. But as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hotel wasn't truly gone. It was still out there, somewhere, waiting for the right moment to reappear. The Stanton Grand was a place that refused to stay buried, a place that thrived on the fear and despair of those who stumbled upon it. And I knew that there would be other places like it, other stories that needed to be told. I never returned to the site of the Stanton Grand, but the memory of that night haunts me still. The hotel may be gone, but the fear it inspired lingers on, a reminder that some places are better left alone. If you ever find yourself drawn to a place that shouldn't exist, a place that whispers to you in the dark, listen to those whispers. Turn back while you still can. Because some places are meant to disappear, but not everyone who enters them does. Morgan Blake. End of entry.